Hi guys, thanks for looking at this. My name is Brock and I am submitting to you my clinical project for Nursing 450. My project is changing protocols in my emergency department for patients and for how to manage patients with stroke-like symptoms. The reason why I've chosen this, I took a lot of time and thought to decide on this one, was because we are a very small hospital. We are kind of new and trying to get off the ground. We're a level 4 critical access rural hospital. And we don't really have a lot of the protocols a lot of the bigger hospitals do for the best practice. So for this one, I chose to do the stroke protocol. So as I said in the previous slide, I chose to do and try to update our stroke protocols for patients with stroke-like symptoms that come into the emergency department. The major things I wanted to focus on was speeding up the diagnosis process and treatment for strokes, um, focusing more on the RACE and NIH stroke scales, and updating and changing our radiology guidelines. The reason for this is the need for this is just we didn't really have a stroke protocol to begin with. As I said, we're a very small hospital, and so we're just kind of getting off the ground. We've had some setbacks, and we're trying to change some things up in the emergency department. After talking with Sister Higgins and after talking with my nurse manager in the emergency department, I came up with this idea. And my nurse manager backed me up and fully supported me on it. Uh, we both feel that we're taking too long. For right now, it takes around 45 minutes for a CT scan of the head to be read and submitted to the doctor to diagnose. That's a long time for a patient with the potential stroke. The protocols we have in place right now are to get the patient into the bed, make sure they have their ABCs, airway, breathing, circulation, check vital signs, add pulse oximetry on them, and then make sure that they're oxygenated, make sure that they're satting above 92%. Find out the time and onset of the symptoms, put an IV in, order normal labs or any additional labs that the provider requires, get a blood sugar check, and then an EKG, and then after that, get them into the CT. Now, the issue here is that we don't have a radiologist on staff. We have to send all our images out. They have to read them and then send them back to us. This is where the holdup and the problem gets. What I've decided to do is initiate a plan to avoid that. So we're going to see later that we're going to initiate more people doing the NIH scales and race scales so that we can kind of get a feel for what the patient really has and what their needs are, and then try to get them scanned and diagnosed as fast as possible so that the treatment can be quicker. All right, so time is brain. This is a really good saying when we're talking about a stroke, because for any delay in care, more damage happens to the brain tissue. Blood flow is cut off, and sometimes it can be damage can be reversed. Sometimes it's permanent. If it takes longer, it becomes more chances that it's going to be permanent and that they are going to have, that they won't survive, or if they do survive, they'll be much less able to do ADLs, and their effort of living will be much more difficult. So right now, best practice is to get the diagnosis and the treatments done as fast as possible. The sooner, the better, because even minutes can reverse lifelong damage that can cause a stroke can cause. So being the level 4 critical access hospital that we are, our job is to stabilize and ship. We do TPA on patients with clots. However, the big thing is to get them going, get them where they are going to need help. Being in a rural hospital, it already makes their time high. They have to drive and get a ride. I mean, some of the ambulances drive 45 minutes to get to the hospital. So you're already talking a huge amount of time has been wasted just on getting to the hospital. And then if we're wasting another 45 minutes on treatment and diagnosis, that's just unacceptable. Okay, so the very first part of this project that I decided to do was a fact-finding mission. I wanted to find out why it was taking so long for a patient with some type of stroke-like symptom to get the treatment they needed. So I sat down, wrote a list of everyone that would be involved in the care of someone who may be having a stroke. So it was the nurses in the emergency department, the doctors, laboratory would take a step in, pharmacy could mix medications that we needed, and radiology was the one that did the scans. So I tried to level it in priority. What was the biggest and most important stuff? So later on we'll talk about that in my plan. So each department was very helpful. I'm on a first name basis with most of the people in the departments because we're such a small hospital. We know everybody knows everybody. Laboratory was more than happy to do whatever they could. They just said, well, the machines only do we'll get it in top priority, any type of blood work that needs to be done or urine work. But the machine is the machine. We can't just speed it up. So there was no change there. Pharmacy said, as long as you give us a heads up, we can mix any type of medication and run it down to you as fast as possible. They really weren't where the time issue was either. Nurses and doctors also said, well, any changes that we can make, we're more than willing to do. And finally, it was radiology that really had the most information that I needed. They said that we don't keep our CT running at all hours. So they shut it off after a procedure and then have to turn it back on. For us, it takes 5 to 8 minutes to start the CT scanner. And then they also are, usually their offices are on the other side of the hospital. The CT machine is in the emergency department, so they have to walk all the way down there. So that's another 5 minutes. So we're taking probably about 10 to 15 minutes if we're rounding, for them to just get the machine up and running. They then told me that because we don't have a radiologist, we have to upload all images that we do, and they can be really big files. They upload them to a radiologist in Flagstaff. We have several different radiologists that we use depending on the time of day. The issue with that is these radiologists are located in the hospital. They are doing other procedures, and they have a long list of scans that they need to read. So the biggest hang up comes from us waiting for a scan to be read by a radiologist, and then they have to type up a document and send it back to us. So it ends up being where we waste the most time. So in all this effort, I had to finagle, I had to convince and talk to a lot of the departments, and we came to an understanding of what the changes and needs of the emergency department and a patient with a stroke are. So we'll talk about that in a little bit on another slide. Okay. So in our efforts, I also looked up people outside of the hospital, what resources we needed. So we ended up starting out with the EMS crews and all the pre-hospital care. We also, because we're the level 4 critical access and what we do is package and ship, I looked into the transportation out of the hospital in another area and radiology. I did get a chance to talk to some of these groups and figure out what their protocols and procedures were, and I did involve them in my plan. So I thought it was going to be really easy to do this part, but connecting with a lot of these different companies actually took time. We have 7 different cities that we really work with that have, or at least 7 different pre-hospital care EMS crews that we work with. We have 4 different flight crews and ground crews for transportation, and then we have the three different radiologists and radiology departments that we work with. So it was actually kind of a lot of work trying to get in touch with these people and talk to them about everything. Okay, so here it is. This is the big plan. After sitting down with all these departments and having long conversations and trying to work out what would be best, I also, after all the research I did, looked a lot of evidence-based practice up, looked up. The Joint Commission is very, very helpful. They have a lot of information on stroke protocols, what we should be doing, how we can better. So I did all that research, and then I figured out what our needs were and what we needed to do. So the big thing is the radiology. We needed to speed up our time in radiology. I decided we began in pre-hospital. So the moment that an EMS crew arrives on the scene and assesses the patient, I think they do the LA stroke assessment, and if they see that there are stroke-like symptoms, what they will do, what we talked about them doing, is calling us. We deal with them over the cell phones because radios are not great on long distances. So I said, just give us a call and a heads up. That way we'll know what you're bringing in before we hear on the radio what it is. And we just can prepare. So if the patient is positive, the crew immediately notifies the hospital by phone and gives a report before or during stabilization to transport. Because we talked about earlier, transport is the biggest deal and it takes the most time. We wanted to make sure that they had told us beforehand. That can give us up to 20-25 minutes max to be ready and prepare ourselves. So after receiving a report, the nurse will immediately call the radiology department and notify the CT radiology tech of the incoming patient and the ETA, get best guess. That way, it gives the CT tech time to go down to the CT machine, get it warmed up, and have it ready. At that same time, we'll have our ward clerk, who usually makes all the phone calls, will call for transport. They will put the crew on standby. This is kind of a normal procedure for us, so it's not a big change, but this is very early in the game. This way, we have a crew on hold, and if we need to transport, we know what we're dealing with. Sometimes the helicopters can't fly because of weather. Sometimes the fixed wings are backed up and have a long line, and sometimes the ground crews are the ones we need to do. So if we're finding out before the patient even shows up what we need and what we're dealing with, it can give us a better chance to start working on stuff. The last thing we want is a patient that needs to be shipped on a timely basis to be sitting in the ER because we can't get them a ride. So the CT tech will come down, warm up the machine, and stand by for the patient. They will wait right there in the CT room for us. Upon arrival, instead of us hooking the patient up to the machine, the nurse will go into the CT room with the patient. We can actually do ABCs in the CT room. We can even, if we want to, hook them up to a monitor or do pulse ox and give them oxygen right there in the CT room while the CT tech is getting the machine ready and getting the patient situated on the machine. The ED physician, if available and able, will wait for the patient to come in at the door so they can give them a quick eyeball and look. The scan, though, is the biggest thing, the thing that we need to do. Get them in and out as fast as possible so we can upload those documents. Once the scan is done, the radiology tech will send the scans to the radiologist. Usually what they'll do is when they send it, they send a stat order online so that it bumps this the radiologist knows that this patient needs to jump to the top of the list. But I talked to the radiologist and they still said sometimes they're away from their desk, sometimes they don't know that even a stat order has come in because they do have other responsibilities. So my resolution to this was to give them a phone call. If the radiologist, on top of sending a stat request, calls, it will physically notify the radiologist that we have a scan, that it is stat, that we need it read as soon as possible. The radiologist says that they will move the scan to the top of the list immediately, and they will read the report, or they will read the scan. They will then call on the phone the emergency department physician and verbally explain the results of the scan. That way, the doctor doesn't have to wait for a result, wait for it to be sent back, and all that. That gives us extra time to work on the patient, initiate protocols, everything like that. The patient will then be brought to the room. The triage nurse will do the triage notes, get them into the computer system, and then the assessment and everything will be done by the physician. That then will resume normal what we're doing. Get the IVs in place, get the blood work done, have laboratory. They're usually the ones that come and get the blood and take it to the lab. So everyone in this point, we're going back to kind of our normal procedures. Once the read is complete, we can notify the pharmacy and they can get the TPA and proper treatment, or we can prepare the patient to ship. At this point, we're going to turn back over to the doctor, and he'll start determining the best course of action with all the diagnostic tools that he has been given. Some of these things can be mixed up, some of them cannot. The biggest thing we were talking about was that the CT scan needs to happen stat and first. So if they are situating the patient and there's time, the ER nurse can put an IV in the patient's arm and pull some blood work out. We can mix that up and try to multitask if at all possible. But the big thing is getting that scan done. So in early March, we decided to implement this. We wanted to do some trial runs. Altogether, from March until this point, we've had about 4 trial runs done. In each of the trial runs, we cut our CT scan times by about 20 minutes, or wait times by about 20 minutes. That, in many cases, is cutting it in half. So some of the patients had to wait half the time it would have taken for a diagnosis and treatment, and to determine what would happen next with them. To me, I feel like this is a huge success for our hospital. It's a game changer, to be honest, and I am very, very pleased with the results. To get this implemented, what we did was we sent an email out to all nursing staff, all physician staff, and radiologists, radiology techs, everyone that would be involved in the care. We explained that we were going to do the protocol. I then sat down and did a couple of trainings, told them exactly what we wanted, and I got the chance to answer a lot of really good questions and get some feedback from people. So far, this has been really, really successful. As a leader, I got the chance to educate, I got the chance to answer questions, be a good resource for people, as well as I delegated. I had some of the night shift nurses that I trained go on and educate the other night shift nurses. I had some of the day shift nurses who I didn't get to talk to. I educated them, and I got to answer a lot of questions. It was really cool, and everyone was very excited about the process, but everyone was even more excited that we were so successful in our process. So as for these are the 4 leadership goals that I had set up, that I wanted to go on and accomplish. I feel like I was very successful in these goals. Organizational skills, I was able to organize groups of people. I was able to sit down and determine problems and do problem solving, and I feel like that was all falls under the organizational category. I also got to sit down, read a lot of information, and educate myself on stroke protocols and what other places do. Collaboration was easy. Well, not easy, but it happened. I definitely achieved that goal. I collaborated with the radiology department in Flagstaff. I collaborated with the pre-hospital EMS crews. I collaborated with my nurses in the emergency department. I collaborated with the doctors in the emergency department, as well as the radiology staff, the laboratory, pharmacy. It was definitely a complete inter facility success that I did there for leadership. I had to communicate a lot. I was on the phone a lot talking to people. I was in person going to offices talking to people. There was definitely a lot of communication going on, as well as the education that I offered. So I feel like I achieved that. And then lastly, I wanted to work on my presentation skills, which I did with the education. I sent out an email to present this information so that everyone had it physically. And I also sent out, and I also in person talked to a lot of people and presented the information. I presented the information to each department head as well. So I sat them down and I told them what our plan was and what I wanted done. They did help me a lot. They tweaked my ideas. They gave me suggestions, and I got a chance to work in what they had said. Okay. So then this was my goals for this project. Now, some of them I didn't completely meet because of time constraints. I'm still actually working on some of the stuff. So the first one, organize and implement a new emergency department protocol for patients showing stroke-like symptoms. This one I half met. The reason why I say that is because the protocol is not in place yet. It has not been written up, and it's not been submitted to our board, our hospital board, who would approve it. This is coming up very soon. My emergency department nurse manager wanted to sit down with me so that we can both write it up after we did all these tests, and so we had proof that it was a working thing, that it would save money and time for patients and for the hospital. So I have not got the protocol in place yet, but it is going to be there. We're very, very confident. There's no downside to doing this. It doesn't cost any more money or anything. So we're going to present it to the board pretty soon. Most likely in May is what my nurse manager says is when we can get it. Number 2, create the safest and most up-to-date protocol on how to manage the patients with stroke-like symptoms. I feel like we've most likely done this. We are much safer. I mean, in a perfect world, we would have a radiologist on staff. Everything would go a lot smoother and quicker. But for our hospital and for what we do, I feel like we are doing the best we can. So I think I did pass that one off. I achieved that goal. Next, educate the staff on the new protocol. Check, done and done. I've already talked about in the last slide that we had a full education. It will become staff-wide once the protocol is in place, but I at least got the chance to teach them about the plan and what we're doing. And then I feel like I was also, and still am, a resource to my coworkers and peers, as far as they can come to me with questions related to the protocol and any other questions that they have. I feel like that they feel comfortable with me. They feel like I am a resource because of all the information that I'm able to offer them about stroke patients and what we need from them, from the nurses. Okay, and then the challenges of this whole project, there were several of them. The project, and I'm going to go quick on this, the project ended up being a lot bigger than I thought it was, which again is why we're still working on it. I've actually probably put a lot more hours than I've documented in here, and were required. I'm probably in the 120s right now. Organizing people, having to teach for teaching, as well as different departments, trying to get everybody on the same page, and working with each other was a little bit stressful. And then finally finding time for me in my life. I've got everything going, working, school, church calling, family, everything. It piles up. So it was rough to try to find time, but I ended up doing it. Thank goodness. My staff nursing managers are so awesome, and they gave me a little bit of time off, and they clumped my time off together so that I could work it all out. Okay. And then I do have to mention that really quickly that I did not start this project with everyone else. I started a different project, and I started working on it because I thought it was a really good one. It was self-defense training for emergency nurses to teach the emergency nurses how to defend themselves and take care of themselves against combative patients. I felt like the studies I've done, it says that there are safer outcomes for the patients and for the nurses and staff if the nurses are trained in self-defense. That way they can restrain a patient that is a danger to themselves or to people around them. One thing I will say is we ran into a lot of logistics problems. We didn't have there was only one person in town that was going to be able to do the self-defense training, and they were just very wishy-washy, were not willing to really help out with it. The nurses didn't really seem interested in it. It's when I offered it to them and I asked if they would come, it wasn't a big priority on their list. So I talked to Sister Higgins and we decided that just to scrap the whole project. And that's when we came up with the other one. So I put probably 10 or 15 hours into this project right here before I had to change gears and start all over again. So that kind of hurt me as well with my time constrictions because I was kind of doing a catch-up type thing. Okay. Who benefits from this project? Being funny, I just decided who doesn't benefit from this project, to be honest. The community does because they get better health care. They can have more confidence in the hospital. The nurses do because they get to implement best practices in their settings, may see changes being made based off of evidence-based practice, as well as have that satisfaction knowing that they did the best that they could and that they were backed up on it. And then the hospital, their risk is reduced because they're not having so many wait times and they're having better patient outcomes. It makes them look better and people have more trust in them when they're doing the best they can. Okay. For me, this is just the beginning. I've talked to my nurse manager, and she's very, very impressed with the work that we've been doing, the ideas that we've thrown out. She's even thrown out ideas of maybe having me or a couple other nurses go to different seminars or trainings on how to best deal with patients who have had strokes. Um, she wants to use me as a resource and keep this going so that we can get this protocol in place. And I'm very excited about it. I feel like I've accomplished something great, and I feel like I'm going to continue doing this because it is so beneficial to the hospital and myself. So this is just the beginning. It's triggered something and started something that I very much enjoyed. So I will be continuing to do this after the project. Okay, so research, design, and planning is what took the most of my time up. I probably 40 plus hours, and then you have to think about the other project that I started that you have to include in here too. Writing a research paper, writing goals, and PowerPoint was about 18 hours. This PowerPoint, I'm not very good at these things. It takes me a really long time. Setting up the goals, and I had to write 2 sets of goals, one for this one for the project that failed, and then my research paper also took quite a while. Education prep for education. So like I talked about, I sent an email out, I talked to all the other staffing. We've not only talked to people in our hospital, I've also over the phone communicated with the EMS crews. I've communicated with the all radiologists, and so we've made these changes, and it did take quite a while to get everything ordered. And then in meetings, my discovery meetings, trying to figure out what was going on, talking with my nurse managers, working with different staff, and getting different ideas, making phone calls to the different departments, different offices and companies. It all took a long time. There's a ton more stuff that I've been putting time into in this whole project. Like I said before, I'm probably closer to 110, 120s for my hours. But I know that I've at least met the goal for the time in my project. Okay, these aren't all everything, but these are some of the good resources that I found. There's going to be a couple pages of them, just trying to get them all fitted in there. But if you ever have any questions, want to review anything like that, then I recommend looking up some of these resources, and if you want to review your own stroke protocols. A couple of the resources that were super, super helpful, Sister Higgins, well, you were awesome. She gave me the protocols to the hospital she works at. I have a friend that works in some of the banners down in Phoenix, which is the big hospital that they run down there, who gave me their stroke protocols. And I also talked to Flagstaff and had a friend in the education department that sent me over the protocols. So I got to compare and contrast the different protocols the different hospitals do. The Joint Commission has really good information on their website. So all in all, thank you so much for looking this over, for listening to my presentation, and let me know what you think. Thanks so much. Bye.